Hi everyone! I've been wanting to make this type of video for a long time, and it's where I talk about kind of the history of some of the vegetables that I am growing this year. And so this is my first attempt at doing that. And I specifically want to be talking about artichokes because I received seeds for artichoke in the mail in my seed order, but I never actually ordered them, but they showed up. And so I decided, well, I'll go ahead and plant them. But really, it was something that I hadn't even it wasn't even on my radar. I know artichokes are warm loving beings that just won't do very well up where I am in Canada. And so I just never thought I would, but here they are, and I'm gonna give them a try. And so now that I have them, I was a little bit interested in learning about their history, kind of where they came from, and as well as whether or not they might be adaptable to more northern climates given the chance. So I did a little bit of a history research dig to try to answer some of these questions, and I thought I would share it with you. So I also have never eaten fresh artichokes before. I've had artichoke hearts on pizza and stuff, but I've never attempted to cook them myself. And so I thought it'd be fun for me to be cooking them whilst talking to you. Is that maybe a little bit more than I can handle all at once? Maybe. We'll see how this goes. It's my first try. So if you're in the mood to be slammed with a little bit of knowledge, maybe you just grab a coffee or a drink, and yeah, we'll see. We'll just kind of talk through it. All right, so all it seems like I need to really cook these is a knife to cut them. Scissors seem to come in handy, and I'm just gonna steam them. So I just have some water. I don't have it going yet, so I will get some water boiling. Okay, water is boiling. Also a little bit of lemon, because I guess they oxidize easy. I'm not fancy enough to have real lemon, so this is just lemon juice. All right, so from my, it's really hard for me to cut this without the camera shaking everywhere. All right, I'm just gonna cut this, over here. Okay, I cut them off in a different spot so that the camera doesn't shake too much. So artichokes belong to the family Asteraceae, or Compositae, and are related to things like sunflowers and thistles and dandelions, that sort of thing. And essentially they are really just giant thistles. Thistles that have been bred for very large immature flower bulbs that aren't prickly. So if this artichoke had been left to mature and grow to its full form, it would have developed a very large poofy purple flower head on it, which is kind of cool. So now closely related to artichokes is cardoon. And I'm going to mention cardoon because it kind of comes up a lot in the history of artichokes. And so cardoon, where artichokes were bred for their very large immature inflorescences, cardoon was bred instead for very fleshy, non-thistly leaves instead. And there's a lot of kind of debate as to whether artichokes or cardoon came first. Now, artichokes and cardoon are also very closely related to a wild variety of thistle, and they're all in the same species, Cardunculus, so they're very closely related genetically. And then there's a whole bunch of other thistle artichoke-like species that are kind of less removed from those three. So we're not going to talk about them as much, but mostly the cardoon and the artichoke. So it's hypothesized that kind of the genesis, if you will, of artichokes began somewhere 110,000 years ago, kind of around the worm glaciation. It's W-U, a couple dots, R-M, worm glaciation. And it began in like the southern Mediterranean. And as the glaciation event kind of like pushed further and further south, the ancestor of these guys kind of moved at the forefront of that glaciation and eventually ended up somewhere that is now the Sahara Desert. And then as the glacier kind of receded, the artichokes kind of followed it back until it hit the Mediterranean again, and that's where it kind of found its like niche and happy place. And from there it kind of spread out east and west through the Mediterranean. And in that point, that's kind of like where it started evolving into the different species we know today, including Cardunculus, which is the species that includes artichokes, cardoon, and the wild variety as well. So using like molecular data and genetics, there's a pair of authors who have done a lot of work in understanding like when the domestication of these two varieties really began. That is by Sonnante and Pignone. So if you're kind of interested in reading more on it, they got like a lot of research going into artichokes, which is very cool. But they think that the actual domestication of artichokes in cardoon began somewhere around roughly 2,000 years ago, where it's thought that Globe, or like the artichoke was the one to be first kind of begin the development, and a little later, but in the same time, cardoon as well. And it seemed that like cardoon was more in the eastern Mediterranean, and the artichokes were developed more in the kind of central and western Mediterranean. So there seems to be like a geographic kind of distribution of them as well. In case you're wondering what I'm doing, I am cutting off kind of like parts of all these leaves where it's a little tougher so that you don't have to eat them. So another way of kind of like delving into the history of vegetables is actually through like written documentation in through art and through like linguistics, so like language and the use of different words. And like this is an area where it feels like a lot of people have spent a lot of time, especially in the like the linguistics aspect of it. And like, wow, it really gives you an appreciation of how language can change and the subtle like nuances of like thistle can incorporate a lot of different things. And so they do start talking about artichokes and cardoon kind of around the 1st century, so like 0 to 100 AD. Pliny the Elder in his natural history book mentions a thistle. That's kind of like all he says is like thistle, and it can't be interpreted very easily as to what it is talking about. So he mentions that it is very profitable vegetable, although he doesn't understand why. And it is a monstrosity that only the beast would consume. So I don't know, you tell me what that exactly means. Is monstrosity referring to like this, or like the gigantic leaves of cardoon? I don't know. Cut off a little bit of these stems. Apparently these are very good, so I'll cook them separately. And I realized I didn't use my like lemon juice, so it was oxidizing. This one you can kind of see the choke in it. It's very pretty. Apparently it's easier to get rid of that after it's cooked. Okay, I'm just gonna put these to steam for a little bit. No, I'm not. I didn't score this. Don't shake the camera. Score the stem. Okay, now I'm going to steam them. Some of the next mentions of the artichoke and cardoon are actually in art around, I think, 200 to like 300 AD. This lovely like mosaic, and you can see there's like 2 things shown there. One kind of looks more like a globe artichoke that we know today that I was like cooking with. And then one looks like a little more like spiny and prickly. And while some artichokes do have that, maybe at that time it represents more like the flower of cardoon, which would have still been like thorny and spiky, because that's not what cardoon was being selected and like bred for. It was being bred for the big leaves. So it's another thing that's a little open to interpretation. And then like moving a little bit forward, I think some of like the first kind of like strong evidence suggesting both cardoon and artichokes is in this recipe book by Apicius. And there's a whole bunch of recipes that very specifically talk about using the leaves of cardoon and then like the artichoke like heart bulb flower of the artichoke. And so that's kind of like one of the first like references where it's like really specifically kind of talking about two of them. And that was like, I think it was like 300 to 400 AD. And it's really interesting to think about that even like at the beginning of like the 1st century, the artichoke and cardoon that they had then probably looked nothing like what we currently grow today. It would have been much different because they're just starting kind of like the breeding practices. It's also interesting to note that a lot of the like written literature and language and art also kind of like coincide with the molecular data that's like suggesting about 2,000 years ago. The art and history is suggesting around the 1st century, so kind of in that same time frame, which is pretty cool. And it's also really amazing to think that like, man, to those like crafty individuals, you know, who are like, look at this like prickly thistly thing growing around here. Like maybe let's like try to like breed this for something that's like a little more palatable. And then like all of the time and effort and 2,000 years that it took to like get to what we are now seeing and growing and cooking. I think that's just very, very cool. So the artichoke that I received in the mail is a green globe artichoke from M.I. Gardner. And it's part of the Cantonese group, if you're interested. It's like the one that's more like rounded looking, not a lot of like points. Now, according to the seed package, it is a perennial in zones 5 to 12, and I'm in like a zone 3, 4, so I'm kind of like outside of that perennial range. And I was interested in whether or not this could be something that could have a bit of adaptability to my growing location. And in order to be able to adapt to different growing areas and climates and conditions, you need a bit of genetic variability. And so that's what I was interested in looking into for artichokes. And it turns out that the artichokes in the Mediterranean area seem to have like a broad genetic base, and I had a large degree of heterozygosity, which is like a good thing basically when you're trying to like grow something in different conditions and have successive generations and pick the ones that are most adapted to your climate. Where the green globe artichoke fits in that, I wasn't quite able to like figure that out. But one thing that kind of like doesn't bode so well for the green globe artichoke is that these are like specifically seed varieties of artichokes, which means they're open pollinated. And this is really good if you want to have like the same thing in your garden every year. You can collect the seeds from it, plant it, and you'll get the same looking vegetable. It also means that they tend to have a little bit less genetic variability. So like good for consistent vegetable crops year after year, less good for adaptability. But I mean, I'm not an expert in it, I can't say for sure, but it's just something to think about. I think overall though, it's much better than if it was just through like clonal propagation where you're just taking tubers of plants and planting them. So I think there's a bit to work with there. And then I came across a couple papers specific to that mentioned the green globe artichoke, where they tried growing it in Ontario and it didn't actually do very well. So in a Canadian climate, that paper or abstract, they did mention 2 other types of artichokes that actually did perform very well. And that was the Emerald Star and Imperial. So maybe if like I'm like really into artichokes after this year, I can like, and they don't go like so great, I can give those a chance. It was really interesting to like do some background reading on one of the vegetables that I'll be growing in my garden this year. Actually, I can show you what they look like. So these are the artichokes. These are celeria. Maybe I'll do a thing about them, but here are the artichokes. I think they're doing very good. Looking forward to having you in the garden, little friends. So I don't know if that was like super sciencey and maybe I should explain things better in the future, but if you thought this was kind of fun and cool, you know, maybe give me some ideas for different vegetables that I could do a little history dig on and talk about, because I really enjoyed this and I think I would like to do more of these. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes. This is like what they're looking like. Steamed them. I mean, they smell good. Now I gotta remove the artichoke heart. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of like cut this and then try to remove. Ooh. And I can see there's like this like fluffy fibrous-y thing. That's the choke, and I guess it makes you want to cough and feels like you're choking. So we'll get rid of that. Look at that! It just kind of popped right out of there. Oh, there's still some. Oh, I see you there. Almost missed ya. Gone. There it is without it. Are you ever nervous about like eating a food you've never had or experienced before? Sometimes I feel nervous about it. So let's see how this is. Like you just like eat this little bit here. It's good. You know you knew what you're cooking when, or like cooking a specific vegetable or something, when not only you have to like look up how to cook said vegetable, but also how to eat said vegetable. And like I had no clue about this bad boy. Or maybe it reminds me more of asparagus. So if there's any northern gardeners out there who have successfully grown artichokes, maybe like tell me about your experience and how you managed it. Because I'd be really interested. I think a lot of it will be just like making sure you give it really good conditions to overwinter in. Like building up a lot of mulch on top of it to protect it from like frost. Alright, so now I'm left with the artichoke heart. Just like this. Yeah. Really good. I would be happy growing this. Like if I could get this to grow in Canada, so any tips are appreciated. Well, thanks for watching everyone. This was fun. I enjoyed kind of doing the research and trying to figure out what I wanted to say about it. So I hope everyone's gardens are doing well, or the little seedlings that they started are doing well, and just sending you lots of garden love. Bye.